Narrowing the Gap in Reading Scores for Indigenous Students, a Strategic Plan Overview by Catherine Wall. The following presentation is an analysis of the findings of the June 2016 Productivity Commission research paper on Indigenous primary school achievement by the Australian Federal Government. The presentation will then compare those findings with the data publicly available from a local primary school, and a proposed strategic plan will be outlined for obtaining further data to support improvements to the educational outcomes of Indigenous learners at our chosen school. This presentation will illustrate the power of data-driven decision-making, or Triple DM, in an educational setting. Triple DM is an essential component of education practice, crosses all levels of the education system, and uses a variety of data to drive the decision-making process. Through Triple DM, educators can turn quantitative and qualitative data into actionable knowledge. The ultimate goal is to use data to improve student learning and build teacher capacity. There are numerous components of data-driven decision-making. Some essential ones are vision. How does a school want its educators to use the data? And what is the communication plan? Is there enough support? The message of Triple DM should start with senior leadership and flow to classrooms and teachers. The absence of a clear vision is a barrier to effective data usage. Technology. All data systems must be maintained and staff upskilled to know how to use them. If there are multiple systems, there must be some interface to avoid data silos. Human capacity. Educators need pedagogical data literacy, the understanding of how to use data and apply those skills to instruction and practice. If schools are serious about creating a lasting data culture, professional development must be part of that plan. The educational outcomes of Indigenous children has been a focus of policy for numerous years. Despite increases in funding and a long history of policy changes, there has been no consistent improvement in achievement standards for at least 16 years. The advent of NAPLAN provided researchers with a platform that was previously unavailable. The findings of the PC report are based upon the results of the 2013 and 2014 NAPLAN tests. On this contingency table, we can examine in column 1 the data that was available to researchers at school level and student level. The second column lists data that is available publicly but was not included in the ACARA dataset. Third column is a list of data which does not exist but might go towards explaining some of the discrepancies between Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, such as cognitive abilities, home learning activities, and the availability of educational resources. The question that researchers wanted to know most was, are we closing the gap? Is this renewed focus on Indigenous education since the Melbourne Declaration of 2008 resulting in improved outcomes? Unfortunately, the answer is no. The Year 5 scores of Indigenous students are much less likely to meet national standard than those of their non-Indigenous counterparts. And although there is a wide variation of achievement for all students, the overall averages of Indigenous students is considerably lower. Educational gaps are evident for Indigenous students in all areas of Australia. More than 80% of Indigenous students live in metro and provincial areas. Only 20% live in areas which we traditionally associate with Indigenous living, that is, remote and very remote areas. Researchers also found that when Indigenous enrollment levels rise, it has an inverse effect on test scores. So does where you live affect your score? Yes, it would appear it does. From this histogram, we can see that the smallest gap in achievement between Indigenous and non-Indigenous students is in the metro areas, followed by provincial, remote, and the largest gap being in the very remote areas, with an alarming gap of 62 points. Gaps in education achievement increase with remoteness, despite the fact that most Indigenous students attend schools in metro areas. At the state level, the gaps are less uniform. The largest gap is in Northern Territory, with 9% of Indigenous students. West Australia is also experiencing a significant gap, with an Indigenous enrollment of 12.5%. So what recommendations were made by the Productivity Commission with regards to those findings? Firstly, they recommend the acquisition of additional data, including information on individual student health and attendance rates. Secondly, they did find some schools where, despite the statistics, were still achieving way above expectation. The Commission recommends finding those schools and getting as much information from them as possible with regards to what policy and changes they implemented to get the results they did. And third, when it comes to instruction of Indigenous students, a culture of high expectation and strong student-teacher relationships are particularly important and must be underpinned by strong school leadership. For this presentation, we will be focusing on a remote primary school called Peggs Creek. Peggs Creek is located in the regional centre of Karratha in the Pilbara region of West Australia. It is an independent public government school with a decreasing general population and an increasing Indigenous population. Peggs Creek also has a large percentage of students with language backgrounds other than English. This strategic plan will look at how these factors are affecting reading scores and what further data is required to address that issue. The school NAPLAN data is only available in a school-wide format and is not broken down into the results of individual students or their ethnicity. On the whole, Peggs Creek performs below like schools and substantially below the national average in reading. The scores in this histogram show that 32% achieved Band 4 and that 5% achieved Band 3 or lower. At that time, there were 11% of students with language backgrounds other than English, and 22% of student population was Indigenous. 3 years later, we look at the same test with different students. Similar to 2014, we have approximately 41% of students scoring Band 4 or lower. But what is really alarming is the rise of students who are scoring Band 3 or lower from 5% up to 37%. By 2017, the Indigenous enrollment had risen to 27%, but perhaps just as interestingly, students with a language background other than English was now at 69%. The theoretical model we will be using is called the Means, Padilla, and Gallagher Conceptual Framework. The model has 5 key elements: reflect, plan, implement, assess, and analyze. The authors also chose to include 6 supporting conditions for the success of the model: data systems, leadership, tools for generating data, social structures for reflecting on data, professional development and tech support, and tools for acting on data. Although the steps were set out in a circular pattern, they do not need to be followed in that exact order. Shattuck uses the metaphor of a hop-on, hop-off coach, and this will be evident in our approach as well. I love you. In order to achieve that, we will start by creating a data team. The collaboration is critical to the success of the collection, analysis, and interpretation of data, and there are numerous benefits to working in a team, including sharing the load, learning from each other, and ongoing professional development. This organizational structure reflects the recommendations of the conceptual framework as it provides leadership involvement, ICT support, and a wide range of backgrounds and perspectives. Research shows that when groups of teachers collaborate in the collection and analysis of data, the recommended changes are more likely to gain traction school-wide. Even if the goal of the project has already been defined, the team will still need to focus the initiative by concretely and objectively identifying what the outcomes should be to improve student learning. You also want to look at what information is available via the report and what information is available locally. The team can analyze this together and start to envision what further data is required. Before you commit to action, check your evidence base. Do research early in the process and select strategies that you think are going to be most effective. The team starts with a list of additional data required and the sources of that data. The methodology for collection is agreed upon and responsible persons are identified. There is a great deal of data available through NAPLAN, but it is limited and does not include data on students' home environment, peers, teachers, or personal information about the student themselves. Some additional data sources might include local school databases, which record attendance, health, and behavior management issues, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, which gives general information observations on the community, interviews with parents and students, and also interviews with other school leaders. Once the data sources have been narrowed down, findings should be recorded accurately and easily. A simple Excel spreadsheet easily can be converted to a number of charts and graphs for displaying purposes. Displaying your data, whether electronically or in hard copy, should make it easy to secure, retrieve, and work with. In this example, the team has created a contingency table using the variables of ethnicity as well as language backgrounds other than English, an attendance rate of less than 80%, and any significant health issues which may interfere with learning. Engaging with your own data will give you a deeper understanding and appreciation. At this stage, the team is coming to some conclusions and starting to devise a plan forward. The strategic plan has been designed using a team approach in an educational setting. In the PC report section entitled What Works Best, the number one recommendation is the use of data in assessing and evaluating the impact of teaching strategies and interventions. As discussed earlier, the key to improving student achievement in both Indigenous and non-Indigenous students is high-quality instruction, which includes the assessment of a child's educational needs, identification of strategies to meet those needs, and an evaluation of the effectiveness of those strategies. The use of Triple DM in schools ticks all those boxes. In addition, it strengthens leadership, provides professional development, and it takes the guesswork out of teaching, resulting in a more effective, evidence-based classroom.